On the debate tonight, NDA government's 3 massive budget announcements ahead of elections 2019.
किसान हैं जो छोटी जमीन रखते हैं, 2 हेक्टेयर तक की जिनकी जमीन है, 2 हेक्टेयर तक की जमीन को, उन सभी को सीधा उनके इनकम में सपोर्ट, डायरेक्ट इनकम सपोर्ट 6,000 रुपए प्रति वर्ष के हिसाब से देने का निर्णय सरकार ने किया है. इंडिविजुअल टैक्स पेयर्स हैविंग टैक्सेबल एनुअल इनकम up to ₹5 lakhs will get full tax rebate. Pradhan Shram Yogi Mandhan will be for the organized sector workers with monthly income up to ₹15,000. This pension yojna shall provide them an assured monthly pension of ₹3,000 after they achieve the age of 60 years.
These big-ticket announcements will touch every citizen. Mirror now asks, should the centre have presented a packed interim budget before the big 2019 general election? How implementable is the Modi government's election budget? Let's debate.
You're watching the Urban Debate on Mirror. I'm Faye D'Souza. Thank you for joining us. We're asking a very simple question. There were 3 major announcements, or as we've been calling them, promises in this budget. How implementable are these promises? First of all, none of this can actually move until a new government is sworn in and that new government decides to agree and pass, which means that you're making plans for a mandate that is not yours. But more importantly, if we examine these 3 announcements, the benefit to farmers who have less than 2 hectares of land, do we have the land records to do this? Do we have the data on the farmers? Can we actually reach them? What happens to landless farmers? The benefit of pensions that you're actually going to give unorganized workers, do we have the data on unorganized workers? How does anyone prove that they're making less than 15,000 rupees if they're being paid in cash and they're unorganized? And what happens if I'm above the age of 30 and I can't make the contribution for the 30 required years? The benefit of 5 lakh rupees, or the tax benefit for those who make less than 5 lakh rupees, the question that needs to arise at this point is, why have you made this decision? Why have you brought it in as a rebate and not a change in the slab? And is this an acknowledgement from the government that demonetization in GST has in fact hurt the bottom of the working pyramid? Joining me on the show, Bhaskar Ghosh for the BJP, Sanjay Jha for the Congress. We also have Abhimanyu Kohar, who's the National Coordinator for the Rashtriya Kisan Mahasangh, Himanshu, Professor at the Center for Economic Studies at JNU, Vivek Kaul, Senior Journalist, Vinay Tiwari, Consulting Editor for the Times Network, and we also have Abhishek Rastogi, who is a tax partner at Ketan & Company. Thank you all of you for joining us on the show. My first question is to Abhimanyu Kohar from the Rashtriya Kisan Mahasangh. Abhimanyu ji, हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए धन्यवाद. हर एक किसान को गवर्नमेंट की अनाउंसमेंट के तौर पे हर एक किसान को 500 रुपए मिलेंगे महीने के. क्या ये इम्पैक्ट रहेगा, क्या कोई बदलाव आएगा किसान की जिंदगी में इस अनाउंसमेंट से?
देखिए, ये बजट कम है और इलेक्शन मैनिफेस्टो ज़्यादा लगता है. अभी सरकार के पास 2 महीने से ज़्यादा का तो टाइम है नहीं इन चीज़ों को इम्प्लीमेंट करने के लिए. तो ये एक सिर्फ जुमलों का बजट लगता है और इसमें ज़्यादा कुछ किसानों के लिए है नहीं. जैसा आपने बताया कि 500 रुपये प्रति महीना किसान को दिए जाएंगे, ये एक भद्दा मजाक इस देश के किसानों के साथ किया जा रहा है. क्योंकि 500 रुपये में तो आज के दिन महीने में क्या होता है, एक स्कूल के एक बच्चे की फीस नहीं दी जाती है 500 रुपये. 500 रुपये में एक पहनने का कपड़ा नहीं आता है 500 रुपये में. 500 रुपये में अगर आप कहीं खाना खाने चले जाएंगे बाहर महीने में एक दिन, तो वहाँ पे कम से कम 1,000-1,500 रुपये का खर्च आता है. तो ये एक सिर्फ किसानों के साथ मजाक है, इससे ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं है. दूसरी बात मैं ये कहना चाहूँगा कि सरकार ने बजट में बार बार ये कहा कि हमने इन्फ्लेशन कम कर दी है. कौन सी इन्फ्लेशन कम की है सरकार ने? जो किसानों के जो उत्पाद थे, आपने उनका रेट, उनके दाम कम कर दिए हैं. यानी आप किसानों पे अत्याचार करने का काम कर रही है ये सरकार। जो किसान जो चीज उगाते थे उसके रेट आपने कम कर दिए हैं, उसको एमएसपी आप पहले नहीं दे रहे थे, आप उसके रेट और ज्यादा कम कर दिए हैं। तीसरी बात ये है मैम इसमें कि जो असली मुद्दे हैं किसानों के, स्वामीनाथन कमीशन की रिपोर्ट इंप्लीमेंट करना और कर्ज मुक्ति करना, उनके बारे में सरकार ने कुछ नहीं कहा है। अब मान लीजिए तो वही बात होगी, अगर किसी को पेट में दर्द की शिकायत है तो डॉक्टर उसको बुखार की गोली दे देता है। तो ये किसानों के साथ मजाक करने का काम किया जा रहा है। और इसमें मैं चौथी बात ये कहना चाहूंगा कि सरकार कह रही है कि हमने फार्म क्रेडिट बढ़ा दिया है अब की बार। देखिए फार्म क्रेडिट जो 11 लाख करोड़ का जो है अभी, उसमें से 65% के आसपास तो एग्रो बेस्ड इंडस्ट्रीज को दिया जाता है, तो किसान को तो कुछ मिलता नहीं है। 30 से 35% मिलता है किसान को, तो वो भी किसानों के लिए कोई फायदे की चीज नहीं है। और इसमें एक अंतिम बात यह है कि सरकार जिस तरीके से पहले भी आपके चैनल पे कई बार किसानों के विषय में डिबेट हुई है, जो किसानों की जो आज असली हालत है उसको सरकार आगे नहीं आने दे रही है। ना तो किसानों का जो सुसाइड का जो डाटा है, ना तो सरकार उसको पब्लिक कर रही है। अब एक जैसे ये योजना है, प्रधानमंत्री फसल बीमा योजना है, उसमें भी सरकार ने इतनी गलत नीतियां अपनाई है कि अगर किसी किसान ने फसल उगाई है बाजरे की, लेकिन उसका अब उन्होंने इंश्योरेंस कर रखा है ईख का, गन्ने की, शुगर केन की फसल का, तो ये किसानों के साथ सरकार द्वारा भद्दा मजाक है और ये जुमलेबाजी की सरकार है। हमने 5 साल में देख लिया है, लेकिन अब किसान इनके बहकावे में नहीं आएगा। जिस तरीके से 3 राज्यों में इनको सबक सिखाया था, आगामी लोकसभा चुनाव में भी इनको सबक सिखाएंगे किसान।
Well, I also want to bring in Himanshu, who is a professor at JNU. Himanshu, my question to you is this. If we talk about the pensions that will be given to the unorganized sector workers, do you see that as an easily implementable plan, or are there enough details here that make it seem like it can be implemented?
Well, first of all, this pension scheme is a rebranding of the Atal Pension Yojna that was already there. So it's not much new as far as the pension scheme is concerned. But really the problem is about how to get the unorganized sector workers to become a part of this pension scheme. And it is a voluntary scheme. In a sense, the worker has to contribute 100 rupees or 55 rupees, whatever is the contribution depending on age, per month. So for example, if you are a 25-year-old, 20-year-old worker, you have to contribute for the next 35 to 40 years, and only at the age of 60 you are going to get a sum of 3,000 rupees. And obviously that is a value that will not make much sense after 35 or 40 years of from now. But I think this is also a scheme which requires unorganized workers to be brought in the scheme. And in the last 2 years, if you look at the experience of the Atal Pension Yojna, only 1.2 crore workers have come in and joined the Atal Pension Yojna, despite government's overdrive and everything that has gone into it. So the idea that 10 crore workers will become an organized, be part of this pension scheme is really not something that is not going to work out despite all the government's efforts. But the other problem which is there, and this is something which is regarding implementation, since you asked about implementation.
Yes.
I mean, suppose I'm an unorganized sector worker. For 5 years, I've been an unorganized sector worker. And suddenly, which is what the government's objective is, that I join a formal sector. What happens to the contribution that I made for the 5 years? Will I be eligible to get this unorganized sector pension, or will I become eligible for the EPFO money that I'm going to get, or I become a NPS pension? I think there are issues which are related to that, and there have been many complaints of people not unable to claim their pensions, even they have contributed for about 10 years or 15 years. That has happened with EPFO. That has happened. That is going to happen with other pension schemes also. What is required is a better kind of a scheme where you allow them to take part in the social security provisions. And last point I wanted to just to end this. Remember, one of the oldest pension schemes that we have is the old age pension scheme, which is almost like a pension scheme for workers who are people in the rural areas who are above 60 years of age and 65 years of age. Now, their pension was fixed at 200 rupees in 2006. This government in the last 5 years, despite 60 economists writing to them almost every year that please raise it, since 2006 it has not been raised. It has not raised it from 200 rupees to even 500 rupees, which was the demand that we had. Now, if you can't provide pensions and cannot give them a decent kind of a pension to the oldest pension holders, or to the widows, or to the disabled pension holders, then I have serious doubts on your commitment to provide pension to the unorganized sector workers. And that is something which is a big question that needs to be asked. And this is also related to the farmers' income transfer. A government which is so insensitive to the the poorest section, most vulnerable section of the population, and is refusing to raise their incomes, raise their pensions from 200 rupees, is suddenly going to promise pensions to all organized sector workers and farmers. Somewhat there is a contradiction here, and there is a trust deficit that is difficult to bridge based on these announcements.
Right. I also have Abhishek Rastogi, who is a tax expert. Abhishek, the tax rebate are offered to those people who make less than 5 lakh rupees, their taxable income less than 5 lakh rupees. The justification that has been put out by the finance minister and most spokespeople of the BJP is this: people need to plan their taxes, which is why we announced it now and didn't wait for the new government to come in. What planning of next year's taxes happen now in February?
I think as far as the tax announcements are concerned, this is more on the expected lines. We saw in the past that the reference when it came to the reservations came to the family income, and the hint was given that that benefit would flow in wherein the family income would be between the range of 5 lakh rupees to 8 lakh rupees for the economically weaker section. So I think from that perspective, it looked very evident that the benefit with respect to the income tax exemptions would come to that bracket of people with income in that range. So I think that benefit of tax exemption has been extended to the income group, and the total exemption would now be extended when the investment is to the tune of 150,000, which means that an individual who earns 6,50,000 in a year can plan the tax in such a way that there is no tax on the total income. So I think that was more on the expected lines. But I think when it comes to rate rationalization now, because if we see the direct tax collections have also gone up 19% as compared to the 10-month period of the last year. If we see the GST collections, it touched 100,000 crores this month. So which means that when these tax collections are improving and when we are saying that the tax compliance is getting better, I think the need of the hour was to remove a lot of these cesses. For instance, this education cess, Krishi Kalyan cess, the surcharge on even the higher bracket income groups should have been looked into. And I think that has been ignored. And when again we come to the tax benefits, if we see the entire tax structure today, before the announcements, if we see the income group between 2,50,000 to 5 lakh was subjected to 5% tax rate. And the moment you cross 5 lakh rupees, the tax rate is 20%. Yes. So it jumps from 5% to 20%. And that's why a lot of these people in the income group range of 5 lakh to 8 lakh was facing a higher brunt. So I think from that perspective, this benefit which comes to a person who basically gets this rebate of even 1,50,000 rupees as compared to the pre-announcements would end up saving some 30,000. So from that perspective, it's a good budget for the middle class income group. But I think the rate rationalization was expected and should have been announced.
Okay, to my studio guests, does a lot of this seem like patchwork to cover up maybe mistakes that were made in the past? And if we actually on one table put down every announcement or every statement that was made by this government over the last 5 years, it would be wildly self-contradictory because there have been so many U-turns. Right?
Yeah, and I think the reason for this is very simple. That, I mean, we've said this earlier as well. The reasoning and the logic behind this exercise is to provide talking points to the political activists on the ground. It's nothing to do with economic logic. It's nothing to do with financial prudence. It's nothing to do with implementation challenges. It's everything to do with building a narrative, because they know that there is a need to build a narrative across various sections. Salary class section has a narrative to be built. Workers, low-income farmers, all of these sectors require a narrative for the parties to go out and campaign with.
But you know, Vivek, here's my question. This was also the question that came up when the RBI's independence was under a cloud, which is, should you be making short-term political decisions at the expense of the country's finances or the long-term finances of the country, which is effectively what's happening here? The budget is not a place to make election promises.
I mean, I mean, that's a proverbial question, and I think these things should have been done outside the budget. And anyway, Mr. Modi makes one political speech per week, so he could have easily promised these things outside the budget. So, I also wanted to make a couple of quick points.
Please
do. The interesting thing is that people now with an income of up to 5 lakh pay no tax, but the moment your income becomes 5 lakh 1 rupee.
Yes.
You pay a lot of tax.
You pay 20%.
So which is not, you pay 20% also, and you pay tax on the income up to 5 lakh as well.
Yes.
So it's not equitable at all. I mean, you're basically penalizing a lot of people. The second interesting thing that I sort of observed in the budget was how Piyush Goyal presented all the good data points. So it's like inflation is low. But what he did not tell us was that inflation is low because food prices are in negative territory.
Yes.
Not food price, inflation is in negative territory. So if you take food and fuel out of the inflation basket, the inflation currently is around 5.5%, which is not as high as 10% as it used to be during the UPA era, but it is still very high. The third point was that, Piyush Goyal talked about the fact that air traffic in India has doubled. And, I mean, air traffic in India has doubled, yes, but, what role does, government has some role to play in it.
I think his point was we've built airports.
Yeah,
200 airports.
No, but then
now
it's not. I mean,
India.
Is this doubling happening because of people flying to all these airports, or is this doubling happening because Mumbai-Delhi traffic has peaked, Mumbai-Hyderabad traffic has peaked, But more importantly, just one point, what he did not talk about was the poor, sad state of Indian Railways, which most people still used to travel in. I mean, just, hardly any mention was made about the railways in the budget. And he is the railways minister as well, which is very surprising.
Yeah, I think the mention that was made about the railways was the fact that unmanned crossings have been moved, but the finances weren't talked about.
Removed only on broad gauge, by the way.
Yes.
Not on all.
Not all. But and when I want to come back to this whole question of statistics and question of what the government is referring to, and how they will consider one piece of statistic when it suits them, and that same piece will be sort of discarded when it doesn't. But picking up from what Vivek said, that they had actually framed a lot of the sentences very interestingly, like the defense budget. When we were listening together, you pointed out that while it was said this was the highest ever, it was not incrementally much higher than last year.
Yeah, so what struck me was that the term used in the budget speech was that for the first time ever, the defense budget has touched 3 lakh crore. And obviously there was a lot of thumping and very orchestrated clapping. The last year's budgetary provisions were 2.96 crores, 96 lakh crores. So it's really only 4,500 crores. So technically it barely covers inflation. So, but the headline is that first time ever 3 lakh crores. So, I mean, that's obviously a bit of spin doctrine.
And as a percentage of GDP, the number might have actually fallen. So.
The number might have actually fallen. Let me now bring in Bhaskar Ghosh of the BJP, who's been listening very carefully and very patiently to all of this. Bhaskar Ghosh, specific questions, and I'll go one by one. Now, first question was from Abhimanyu, and we'll switch this to Hindi, so Abhimanyu will be able to rebut to you as well. Abhimanyu ने कहा कि आपने स्वामीनाथन कमीशन रिपोर्ट को इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं किया, आपकी जो जितने सारे अनाउंसमेंट्स थे किसानों के बारे में, especially to do with the insurance policies, those have not worked, और अभी ये 500 रुपए से कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. तो आप बताइए मुझे कि ये जो 500 रुपए का अनाउंसमेंट हुआ है, 6,000 रुपए का अनाउंसमेंट हुआ है, कौन से एनालिसिस, कौन से रिपोर्ट, कौन सी एजेंसी की कहने पे गवर्नमेंट ने ये डिसीजन ली?
देखिए, पहले बात तो ये है कि ये जो बजट है, इस बजट का 2 डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट है. एक तो एस्पेक्ट है बजट किस दिशा पे एक आपको मार्गदर्शन करते हैं, किस दिशा पे सरकार चलना चाहता है, और सेकंड जो इम्पोर्टेंट बात है इस बजट में कि किसानों के लिए, जैसे माननीय वित्त मंत्री जी ने कहा कि किसानों के लिए फर्स्ट टाइम 22 आइटम्स को एमएसपी के अंडर लाया गया है और ये कॉस्ट प्लस 150. इट हैज बीन promised that okay fine it was to be in the last bench of C3 but it has up to cost plus 50% we have the achievements, and in order to protect the small farmers having 2 hectares of land, like in West Bengal, I am from West Bengal which has been announced 5,000 rupees per hectare, as because there is a small land, there is no big land. So small land, the states which have a small farmers, so they have a 2 hectares, is totally unprotected. So they have been given an amount of 6,000 rupees, which will be affected from, I believe, 2018. So the thing is that the attitude of the governments for this 6,000 rupees per year, it was beneficiary. 12 crore farmers will be directly benefited,
Okay.
and it will be affected from
Okay,
2018.
Mr. Ghosh, how do we know 12 crore farmers will be directly benefited? Have you checked all their land records? Do we have the land records in our country to know that these 12 crore farmers will be
No, in
benefited?
fact, when honorable finance minister in the budget paper has been declaring it, that means he has checked it from his own department. I at the studio cannot tell you, but it has been checked. That is why it is sanitized.
I respect your position, but when the honourable finance minister makes a statement in his speech in the studio, I have to question because we haven't seen that data. Next question, Bhaskar Ghosh, what happens to those farmers who have no land at all? Do they not qualify?
But one thing, please allow me 1 second. Allow me one second.
And what happens to the land
75,000
acquisition
crores
matters?
of outlay is there per year, and 20,000
No, we
crore
know that,
allocated
Mr.
for the
Ghosh.
revised estimate in the current year.
No,
See
we know
the
that.
amount
I
of
want to
money
understand
government
from you, how will
allocated.
this be implemented? How will you identify these farmers? What paperwork will they submit? And what happens to farmers who have no land?
In fact, every state BLRO has got the land records, which is now most of the states have digitized it. From that BLRO land
Abhimanyu
record,
ji,
you can find is one of the sources, the BLRO land records.
सारे
you
स्टेट
can
गवर्नमेंट्स
find.
के पास लैंड रिकॉर्ड्स
You can-
डिजिटाइज्ड है
you can
जिसमें से
find
पता चलेगा कि
that what is the
एक-एक
position
किसान के
of
पास
land
कितना
owning.
लैंड है, जमीन कितनी है?
lot of states have digitized.
देखिए, इनको जब ये प्रधानमंत्री फसल बीमा योजना लागू कर रहे थे, तो इनको ये नहीं पता था, इनके पास ये रिकॉर्ड नहीं थे कि किस किसान ने कौन सी फसल उगाई है। शुगर केन के किसान का इन्होंने इंश्योरेंस कर दिया बाजरा की फसल का। तो ये सारी फर्जी बातें हैं। और दूसरी बात मैं इनको ये बताना चाहूँगा कि जो ये बातें कर रहे हैं इतनी बड़ी बड़ी कि हमने एक जो इनपुट कॉस्ट है उसमें 50% जोड़ के दे दिया है। देखिए महोदय, आपको ये मालूम होना चाहिए, स्वामीनाथन कमीशन ने कहा था कि C2 कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव कॉस्ट में 50% जोड़ के देंगे, लेकिन आपने नहीं दिया है। और प्रधानमंत्री जी ने चुनाव से पहले यही कहा था कि हम स्वामीनाथन कमीशन की रिपोर्ट को लागू कर देंगे। एक नहीं, उन्होंने बहुत सारी सभाओं में ये कहा था कि हम लागू करेंगे। और आपकी सरकार ने फिर 2015 में सुप्रीम कोर्ट में एफिडेविट दिया था। आपको मालूम होना चाहिए कि भाई आप ये कि हम इस रिपोर्ट को लागू नहीं कर सकते हैं। तो जो भी आप ये जो चीजें कह रहे हैं ये धरातल पे कहीं एग्जिस्ट नहीं करती। और मैं दूसरा और अंतिम पॉइंट आपको ये बताना चाहूंगा। आप 1 मिनट का समय दीजिए। अभी वित्त मंत्री ने ये कहा कि लगभग 500 के आसपास,
सुन लीजिए,
आप 500 के आसपास सुनिए,
उसको आप क्यों नहीं इंक्लूड कर
सुन
रहे हैं?
लीजिए आप एक बार, सुन लीजिए।
One second, Bhaskar Ghosh, you must listen, please.
Then you find
आप एक बार सुन लीजिए, धैर्य रखिए सर। देखिए, जो आदमी जिसकी बुनियाद झूठ पे खड़ी होती है वो इतना ज्यादा बोलता है, तो आप धैर्य से सुनिए, आप उसमें इतना ज्यादा उतावले मत होइए। आपने ये कहा, वित्त मंत्री जी कहते हैं कि 500 ई मंडियों को हमने डिजिटलाइज कर दिया, उनको इलेक्ट्रॉनिक उससे जोड़ दिया उनसे। मैं आपको चुनौती देता हूं सर, आपकी सरकार को, और आपको चुनौती देता हूं, हमने पूरे देश का भ्रमण किया है, आप हमें एक भी ऐसी मंडी दिखा दीजिए जहां पे ई नेम मंडी की योजना चल रही हो या जहां पे ई मंडी हो। हम तो पूरे देश में भ्रमण कर चुके हैं, हमें आज तक ऐसी एक भी मंडी नहीं मिली जहां पे ई मंडी सुचारू रूप से चालू होती हो। तो आपकी कोई भी बात, आप यकीन मानिए, आप इस चीज को एक्सेप्ट कीजिए कि आपकी कोई भी योजना किसानों से रिलेटेड कहीं भी ग्राउंड पे एग्जिस्ट नहीं करती है। आपकी सारी बुनियाद झूठ के ऊपर खड़ी है। इसीलिए 3 स्टेटों में आपने किसानों ने आपको ये दिखाया कि आप कितना झूठ बोलते हैं और आपने किसानों से कितनी वादा खिलाफी की है। और आप ये देख लीजिएगा, अभी ज्यादा समय नहीं बचा है, आगामी लोकसभा चुनाव में भी किसान आपको दिखा देंगे कि आपकी सारी बुनियाद झूठ पे खड़ी हुई है।
Bhaskar Ghosh, let me move on to the next question. The next question is this. The pensions that are being offered to unorganized workers, what data is the government referring to? Because until yesterday, you were telling us that you don't have data on unorganized workers, and that's why a job crisis cannot be confirmed or refuted. Please tell me, how will this pension work? How will you identify these unorganized workers? How will you find out whether or not they're making 15,000 rupees a month? And how will you give them the benefit?
See, this is Mega Pension Yojna, which is Pradhan Mantri Mega Pension Yojna. I will give you some of the indexes which has been already clarified in today's budget.
No, please don't.
that
We
there
have a
is-
copy of the budget. I want
Just a moment.
clarification, Mr. Ghosh, which we have not received today. Like, here's a question. Let's say, and it says if you're 29 years old, you pay 100 rupees a month. Let's assume through some magical intervention, I'm able to produce a letter that shows that I only make 15,000 rupees in a pakoda stall.
I'm giving you the-
that's why I
from the
qualify.
budget-
I pay 100 rupees for the next 30 years, but thankfully, because of a growing economy, I am no longer at 15,000 rupees a month. Will I still qualify? Will I still get the pension? How will this work? What happens if there's a 32-year-old or a 40-year-old
one
who
of the
wants to sign up?
sources-
Will they be able to sign up? What happens, for example, to people who only get work 6 months in the year or 3 months in the year and don't get work for the rest of the months in the year? What happens to someone who sells apples only in certain times of the year and doesn't have apples because they're not in season in the rest of the year? How will they qualify a 15,000 rupees salary or 15,000 rupee income every month? There are no answers, Mr. Ghosh, unless you can offer them to us right now. Please go ahead.
I'm telling you, one of the options could be, see, it has been mentioned in the budget speech
Shouldn't you know?
that EPFO memberships has increased by around 2 crores. So these EPFO members, when they are registered with the government and they give their contribution, where government this time is 4% increment and the government contribution is also there. So this could be another possible datas.
Mr. Ghosh, sorry, forgive me for interrupting you, but EPFO data will only have organized sector employees. By merit of being qualifying for EPFO, they're organized and not unorganized. This was meant for unorganized sector. In fact, the finance minister mentioned rag pickers, apart from other professions that he called out in his speech. How will you get this together? There are no answers, Mr. Ghosh. How will you implement this?
No, this unorganized sector, what you're talking about, even the records of this unorganized sector will be taken by the respective labor departments. They have to come and they have to disclose, and based on that,
Okay. I will interrupt you again. Forgive me, but the government of India has said in Parliament that the Labour Department and the Labour Ministry doesn't have data on the unorganized sector, which is why we don't have a complete number of employment or unemployment, because the largest portion of our country is unorganized and the Labour Ministry is unable to measure it. So if you're going to tell me that in the next 2 months, the Labour Ministry is going to magically learn how to solve for that problem, I will ask you, why didn't they magically learn to solve for that problem 4 years ago?
No, this was, first of all, this was the scheme which has been launched, which has been announced in this interim budgets. So this interim budgets, hence onwards, the records will be, if it's not there, the records could be created. I believe it is part of the records should be available with the government, and the government is going to affect it.
Okay, I'm glad you think that, and I really wish we had done this earlier. Perhaps around demonetization, when we didn't have that data, would have been useful then. Sanjay Jha of the Congress has joined us. Sanjay Jha, go ahead, please.
Faye, I think the first point I wish to make is that a government is elected and a government is expected to deliver 5 full budgets. But I think it was politically immoral, unethical and unprincipled on the part of the BJP or the NDA to announce this was not an interim budget, this was like a full budget. I mean, he talked about tax amendments, he talked about sops to the farmers. So clearly, I would say breaking with what ought to have been a proper parliamentary protocol was to let the new government take the calls that this government in its political desperation has tried to play its own electoral tactic. But the fact of the matter is, let's take the example of farmers. The farmers today have been ravaged over the last 5 years. If you take the data of the amount that they are going to give to every household of 18,000 rupees, it's a laughable number. You're talking about actually assuming one household has 4 people, 4 rupees per day per person. So I think this is making a mockery of the entire
Ja,
farming community.
How is this
And
different
to
from your
believe
income
that, you know,
guarantee
the,
scheme
even on
where you
MSP,
didn't give
as
us
somebody
even the
rightly
details
pointed
to
out,
criticize? So when Rahul Gandhi promised that he would do a basic income to every poor household, you gave us no details whatsoever of what that income will be, what households will get covered, how often will they get paid. So it's very easy here for you to criticize, but when we wanted to look at your plan, the Congress gave us no details at all. And so you left us then assuming that you want us to believe you will fulfill a plan that has no outline at all. How is this different?
Well, let me answer you, Faye. The truth is that the minimum income guarantee that will be extended to all the poor in India is going to be announced when we formally put it up in the public domain, when Mr. Gandhi puts the manifesto for a very frank and a public debate. And it's going to happen very, very shortly. You don't have to wait too long. But the point that I wish to make, our budgets for that are significantly higher. We believe this is nothing but synthetic tokenism, because at the end of the day, this is going to make no difference to the life of a farmer. I mean, you have let them down on MSP, as somebody rightly pointed out. They have Mr. Modi and Mr. Goel are going to town saying that we are going to relieve rural distress. You have used the wrong formula. It's C2, it's not A2 plus FL. I don't want to get into the technicalities, but they are brazenly misleading the farming community. Where is the doubling of farm income that Arun Jaitley talked about? It's not going to happen because agriculture is growing at around 2.5%. So the bottom line is you have let them down. As far as the middle class is concerned, please find out as to when will this taxable income relief come into play. I have looked at some of the fine print. It's going to come into play in 2020. So what exactly was Piyush Goyal doing? You need to ask him that question. And I think you have taken the middle class for a jolly ride. The middle class, by the way, has paid almost 16 lakh crores in excise duties on oil products when the oil prices had crashed. What happened to all that money? So end of day, to give a relief at the end of 5 years on the first slab, and that too on a taxable income only up to 5 lakhs, is frankly speaking nothing but a deceptive spin.
Let me take this
Bottom
back to my guests
line
in the
is that
studio,
this
please.
government has actually failed to deliver on the fundamentals.
Yes. So, Vivek, we heard, we've been listening to answers from the BJP spokespeople, and we must be, if we're going to be completely fair, they're in a difficult position tonight.
Yeah, I mean, they really are, yes. I mean, they really do not have the answers. So.
And what we need to, when I communicate as journalists to, and all three of us are journalists, to our audience today is, yes, announcements were made, but there's no clarity. This government perhaps shouldn't have been making announcements for a mandate that wasn't theirs. Even so, there's no clarity on how any of this will be implemented. And the audience should know that.
Yes, and I think the government has done that because they are perhaps secure in the fact that most voters out there are people who really make a difference to electoral outcomes, either don't care about data or don't understand that. So obfuscation is easy to do. You can use label headlines, you can use label terms, you will say, oh, we will remove poverty, oh, we will do this, but there is no authentication or backing of that. I think both sides, and it's not just about the BJP alone.
Absolutely.
I think politics is now about selling pipe dreams, whether those pipe dreams are practical or not. The Congress is equally guilty of doing that. The minimum income guarantee scheme, when he said we will identify the poor, we don't have data on the poor. It's as simple as that. And just like the BJP can't produce it, neither can the Congress. There is a fundamental problem that we have, that there is now a competitive political game going on between selling pipe dreams. Every government or every political party wants to sell a pipe dream. Unfortunately, we have a demographic system.
Can I respond to that?
Where it is difficult for an ordinary person to actually understand that there is very little data or information to substantiate whatever promises are being made either in the budget or out of it.
You know, Vivek, yesterday on the show, we called out a list of data reports from the government that actually have not been submitted. Some for 2 years, some for 4 years. And there are two things. One is, if you're going to withhold data that's uncomfortable because you don't believe that it looks good, for publicity, that's one thing. But the reason why government actually accumulates statistics and data is because that's how you base your decisions. So now you're making decisions, for example, on doubling income and on farmers, whereas the agriculture wages report has not been submitted for 4 years.
Yeah, so it basically goes back to the point I made about, the government essentially killing its NSSO data yesterday. So NSSO is one of the most important inputs into the GDP. So if you don't trust NSSO data, what do you really trust? And the same with unemployment. I mean, the Labor Bureau used to put out these annual employment and unemployment numbers, and the 2016-17 report was held back because it was inconvenient for the government. And now we are holding back the unemployment report that came out yesterday. So I guess
the farm suicides data has not come out since demonetization.
Yeah, there are a lot of such things. So I just wanted to make a simple point. I think the BJP would have been much better off by simply depositing money into Jan Dhan accounts and finishing the whole thing rather than putting on this giant act of we'll do this, we'll do that.
Is this a formalization of money being handed out before elections?
Yeah, I mean, what else is it?
I mean, it just happened in Tamil Nadu. Before elections, money would be distributed. You've now bypassed the Election Commission and found a way to do it officially.
So the one unusual thing that has happened, and that's a giveaway, is that in this scheme for farmers, 20,000 crore has been allocated for this quarter itself. And they have said so publicly that this will start happening as of tomorrow. I mean, I don't know how that's going to happen, but they're almost claiming, because they are, and that's why it's in 3 installments, because they are desperate to ensure that the first installment of 2,000 actually reaches the account. Because that's when people start feeling something has happened. Whether it is practical or not, it's still left to be seen. But they're desperate.
Whether the price of a vote is 2,000 rupees or not is left to be seen.
And how much people actually get that? I mean, that's another big question.
Well, Himanshu, here's the other point we must note. When earlier, when politicians would hand out money before elections, this would come from party funding. It's coming now, in this case, from our tax money. This is a dangerous precedent.
I think
it is. And I think there are consequences of this which we are not as of now imagining, but these are very, very serious consequences. Let me tell you that this government is also a government for the last 4 years which has seen real investment in agriculture decline. And that's a fact that is coming out from the national accounts data. This is a government which has neglected agricultural sector over the years. And at the end of it, when your term is ending, you are distributing this money. And it is coming at a cost. Remember, already 1.9 lakh crores have been locked in for loan waivers. And that has impacted the investment at the state levels. So there's investment at the state level in agriculture and in other sectors has also gone down. Now look at this year's budget, the numbers that have been presented. There's a massive increase in revenue expenditure, but capital expenditure has remained stagnant. At a time when the economy is in crisis, the rural economy is suffering from a demand depression, and you are basically coming to a situation where you want to give money to the poor people and you want to give money to the rural areas, but it is at the cost where you are ignoring the structural problems. So you can't actually be having this every year, and you can't basically be trying to resolve the problem of agrarian crisis or the rural crisis where the wage growth have slumped by simply handing out money. This is something which is not going to end in 1 year or 2 years. And this is happening at the cost of ignoring the structural problems. So there is no investment happening. There is no way the basic infrastructure is being created. Last year, the budget that was allocated for rural housing, rural roads, both have been not spent. So you are not spending on basic rural infrastructure, and then you are claiming that I am going to create, improve the rural economy by giving money to the poor people. You can't do that. You have to create those things, and if that is, the income transfer is coming at the cost of those ones, expenditure on health, expenditure on education, expenditure on NREGA, if it is coming at that cost, then this is, I think, this is not something which is going to be sustainable for long run. And in a very bad competitive politics, where parties are competing as to who can give more. So I really have a problem with this whole approach of income transfer at the cost of not doing substantial investments or spending money on the basic necessities or basic services which are required. I'm fine with the giving cash transfers for the elderly, for disabled, for those who are marginalized. And for those people who are able to earn, who are willing to work income, like the farmers or people, casual workers, the government should create infrastructure and enable them to earn more income rather than simply giving them money. So the whole philosophy itself is something which is flawed.
Yes. Yes, just one second. I have a quick question. I have a quick question for Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu ji, क्या आपको लगता है कि अगर किसान के हाथ में या उनके बैंक अकाउंट में 2,000 रुपए इलेक्शन के पहले पहुंच जाए, तो क्या उनके वोट पे फर्क पड़ेगा? और जैसे कांग्रेस पार्टी ने भी अभी प्रॉमिस किया है कि वो जब आएंगे या वो अगर आप उनको वोट देंगे तो वो बेसिक मिनिमम इनकम सबके अकाउंट में पैसे पहुंचा देंगे। क्या किसानों को ये चाहिए?
देखिए, किसान अब बीजेपी की चाल और चरित्र को पहचान चुके हैं। वो ये जान चुके हैं कि ये झूठे वादे करते हैं, उसके अलावा इनका कुछ नहीं है। तो ये 2,000 रुपये पहुँचाएँ या 4,000 रुपये पहुँचाए, अब उससे कोई फ़र्क पड़ने वाला नहीं है। अगर ये किसानों की रियल मांगे एड्रेस करते हैं, अगर ये चुनाव से पहले स्वामीनाथन कमीशन की रिपोर्ट को ईमानदारी से लागू करते हैं और किसानों की कर्ज मुक्ति करते हैं, उसी सिनारियो में किसान इनसे खुश हो सकते हैं और जो इनके प्रति गुस्सा है वो कम हो सकता है। ये 2,000 या 4,000 वाली बातों से कुछ नहीं होने वाला है। मेरे से पहले वाले जो अभी एक एक्सपर्ट बोल रहे थे, मैं उनकी बात से कुछ हद तक सहमत हूँ कि आप मेन चीज तो ये है, आप जो एमएसपी है उसका जो स्वामीनाथन कमीशन के आधार पे कि उसकी इनपुट कॉस्ट में 50% जोड़ के आप देंगे, तो वो एक रियल पॉइंट है। आप उस पे बात नहीं करते हैं। आप ये कह रहे हैं कि हम 2,000 दे देंगे, 1,500 दे देंगे, 3,000 दे देंगे, इससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ने वाला। और जैसे अभी 3 स्टेट में दिखाया था, किसान आने वाले चुनाव में भी इनको सबक सिखाएगा।
Sanjay Jha, please respond to what Vinay Tiwari said when he was speaking, when he said even the Congress cannot produce data on poor, on the definition of poor and how you will reach all of these people. So how are you making these announcements or these promises right now?
Faye, let me tell you, we have already done a lot of homework on this already. Targeting the households, yes, I agree with him. It's a challenge, which is why a lot of people use universal basic income, because you just give it to everybody. But that's not, we don't have that kind of unlimited resources. But what we have definitely discovered during our study is that you have to rationalize some subsidies. It doesn't mean that the subsidies will be removed. There is enough scope to actually improve even your revenue. And therefore, it's a fine play between income and expenditure and the way you actually target the scheme. The way we are looking at it, Faye, is very simple. You define a certain standard minimum income and you make sure that anybody who goes below that is made up for that deficit. And I can tell you this for a fact, India has the resources. Actually, giving cash transfers in a great number of ways will make our system a lot more efficient. And you have, we started direct benefits transfer, you do have Aadhaar, and these can be used in a very, I would say, constructive manner
larger
to
part
pass
of
on
the
the
last
benefit
2 years
to as
saying
many
Aadhaar
people
was
in the poor
very
category.
dangerous and should be completely thrown out?
Well, let me tell you, on your program, I've said that 100 times, you can pull out the video. The Congress party's belief has always been the same. Aadhaar was only meant for one purpose, is for welfare distribution services, and that's what we are consistent with. Let me actually bite the bullet on your question. The Congress party will make sure that, unlike the Bharatiya Janata Party, it will not be made mandatory for the common man for telephones and banking services and passports and various other things that can make it draconian or part of a surveillance state. Well, let me be very clear on that.
Well, I'm glad you're very clear on that, Sanjay Jha, because that's a Supreme Court order, and I don't believe either the BJP or the Congress has much choice in that. But I'm just coming back to the fact that...
Well, let me tell you, no, excuse me. The Supreme Court order was violated by the BJP. The BJP actually violated that, and they continue to do so. If you have been reading recent reports, the BJP still
okay, so this is
continues
a
and
completely
wants
different
to impose
conversation.
it.
Let me just
on
rein
banks
this
and
back
telephones.
in.
Let's not ignore the reality.
Yes.
But which part we have violated? Which part we
I was
violated?
responding to somebody who was...
Yes.
What Sanjay said.
Yes, Vivek, go ahead.
In fact, Sanjay basically talked about rationalizing subsidies. This is a very, very interesting area. Now, what do you rationalize? Do you cut fertilizer subsidy and be labeled anti-farmer? Do you cut food subsidies? If you cut food subsidies, then there is this whole infrastructure of Food Corporation of India, FCI, FCI buying wheat at MSP, rice at MSP from the farmers, then selling it through the PDS.
Yes.
So do you stop that? I mean, these are very tricky questions, and you need a very strong-willed leader and an administration to push this through. And Congress and their socialist past, I mean, I'm really not sure as to, they would be doing these things.
To be completely honest, the Congress, while they've made this one big announcement that we will do basic income and no details whatsoever, What is your solution for farmers? You have no solution. You've come back to Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, farm loan waivers all over again. You have not, I mean, it's almost like nobody's bothered to read the Swaminathan Commission report. It's all there, but you don't have new solutions. You don't have new answers. You have a party leader who makes statements about how everybody's talking about a new India. What is this new India?
Faye.
Is this an India where we have no research, where we don't bother to do our homework, and where we don't read reports?
So, one quick thing, just before Sanjay responds. Actually, you're right. Nobody has actually read the Swaminathan Committee report, and I'll tell you why.
Can I answer
They
the
keep
question?
referring to that report as if that was the only thing in the report was MSP. It wasn't. There are many more things in that report, which has been gathering dust for the last 12 years now.
Yes.
So, in that sense, both sides are equally guilty of not following what they themselves preach. That report is a comprehensive report on the problems of the Indian agriculture system. It's not just about MSP.
And before we go back to Sanjay, I want to just point out one thing, Vivek. When the Oxfam report came out about the difference, the widening gap between rich and poor, and again, government machinery plus trolls on Twitter worked overtime rubbishing that report and saying that it was not reliable.
It's a very...
But before I go there, the report actually, at the end of that report, made 3 or 4 suggestions to the Government of India. Improve your healthcare, which is your public healthcare that should be for free. People will save money if they don't have to spend money on healthcare. Improve your supply of water so that women don't have to spend time and money accessing water. So it actually said healthcare, education, very specific things. My only point here, and I'm not saying we need to listen to Oxfam, my point is there is a lot of work to be done on the ground in our country, and throwing lollipops at people, every time we do it, we lose opportunities to actually solve problems.
Which is true. And you know, talking about inequality also, I mean, we may buy the Oxfam report or not, but there is data which shows that per capita income of Bihar is around 38,500 rupees. Yeah. The per capita income of Delhi is 3,29,000. The per capita income of Goa is close to 4 lakhs. So there is inequality for you. I mean, you don't have to go to Oxfam to check inequality. So, and you know, and one more point I wanted to make, you know, talking about all the reports that the government commissions and the experts write, you know, believe me, if we started reading those reports and if we implemented even 1/4 of what they suggest, India would be a much better country. So politicians just commission reports, and you know, which is where it all ends. So.
All right, we have run out of time, and we're simply going to leave it here. You will see banner headlines on your newspapers tomorrow morning. What you must remember is that these are big promises. These are promises that are being made a few months before elections, and we don't have any answers, and we've tried all day. We don't have answers of how these promises will be fulfilled, if they will be fulfilled at all, and what it's going to cost, where the money is going to come from. We don't have those answers. So they're great promises, but can you implement them? Can't even tell us that right now. So while you read your paper in the morning, have that in mind. When you decide to vote, remember to only believe those promises that can actually be backed by data and can give you a roadmap on how they're going to be implemented. We're going to leave it there here on the urban debate, and before we wrap up, our colleague got in touch with Dharmendra Pradhan, who had similarly sort of jingoistic things to say about the budget. This is Dharmendra Pradhan commenting on the budget announcement today.
In terms of reality, it does not, you know, tantamount to too much for the middle class. Middle class को बहुत ज़्यादा फायदा नहीं दिया आपने.
I feel pity about them, those who are alleging in this way. Entire middle class is enthroned on pressure of Prime Minister Modi. There is a long-standing demand. The tax slab should raise up to 5 lakhs. Tax should not be there up to 5 lakhs. That we have fulfilled today. Not only that, lot of tax benefit. 3 crore people are going to get benefit. An amount is 18,000 crore. It has multiple positive impact on the entire economy. More spending will be there, more savings will be there, more confidence within the middle class will come out. This is a very big economic stimulation for the economy.